Hello, everybody. My name's Jim, and I'm ripping off the Band-Aid and talking about my least favorite reads of this year. This is going to be a spoiler-free video. I only have 8, so 8 1 to 2 star books this year, and 2 of them were really close to not being in this video, but unfortunately, they just barely fell below 3 stars and are here. The first one is Clowns vs. Spiders by Jeff Strand. I read this last month, and what started off as a charming book with characters that I immediately latched onto simply because of their personalities, the dialogue in this book started to run together. The incline wasn't so steep in the beginning, but then it started to tilt vertically and go down pretty fast. The premise of the story is that these circus reject clowns are down on their luck, and to make matters worse, spiders have started swarming the town and are attacking people. In this book, there's a lot of action, but when these clowns would participate in the action, they would talk through it, and it would muddle the action down and lower the stakes quite a bit, and it bugged me. So between the dialogue running together, including the side characters, it wasn't just the clowns kind of blurring the lines with each other, but the fact that they had to talk through everything as they were fighting the spiders, that bugged me too. Spiders aren't going to wait for you. They're just going to bite. They're not courteous. The next highly rated 2-star book is Clover by Dory Sanders. This used to be a 3-star book, but after further review and evaluation, I did drop it down to 2. And again, it's because of the characters. I just wanted so much more, especially from Sarah Kate and Everline. Their dynamic was especially interesting. The premise of the story is that Clover's father has died. It is up to her stepmother now to take care of her. Her stepmother, Sarah Kate, is white, and Sarah Kate is attempting to integrate herself into this black family who doesn't necessarily accept her. The family dynamic had so much potential, but Dory Sanders opted to write chapters where Clover, the main character, she's a child, would go off on these tangents, things that didn't directly relate to the plot. Again, Sarah Kate and Everline were the most interesting characters in this book, and by the end of it, I just felt like I wanted more from both of them especially. But again, it's a cute book. You might pick it up and enjoy it. Listening to Dory Sanders talk about this in interviews and her inspiration for this book is really beautiful. If you want to listen to one of the interviews that she had where she talks about the inspiration that she had for this book, I will link to that in the description below. Now moving on to my mid to low 2-star rated books. Chrysanthemum by Kevin Hankes is a children's book that I read forever ago when I was a child. I did not have a critical brain back then. When I read a book, I just read a book. But as an adult, I didn't really like how the teacher handled this whole situation. Chrysanthemum is a little girl, she's a mouse, who was given the name she has. She loved her name before she started school, but of course when she goes to class, the kids around her bully her because of her name. They hate her name, they laugh at her, make fun of her, talk about how long it is, and suddenly she hates her name. So she runs home, she tells her parents that this is going on, and they tell her how beautiful her name is. Meanwhile, when she goes back to school, the teacher just slaps the bullies on the wrist. She doesn't really do anything. She just says, "Okay, guys, this isn't nice." Hey everybody, Future Jim here. Correction, the teacher doesn't even say that what the bully is saying isn't nice. She just says, "Thanks for sharing." Like bullying another child is show and tell. It's even worse than I thought. Not even a slap on the wrist. The teacher just acknowledged the bully and really didn't do anything about it. Randomize by Andy Weir is a short story about a casino heist, which didn't even take place until the end. There was a lot of talk about quantum physics, and as somebody who's really not a science person, you know, I never watched Big Bang Theory, it all went over my head. That was the first 1/3 of this book. And then the second 1/3, we are introduced to the character who is going to perform the casino heist. When we got to the actual casino heist, I do remember, and I don't remember her name, but I do remember liking the character that performed the actual heist. She was confident. She was kind of snarky. She was ready to do her job. I wish I was able to spend a bit more time with her because I liked her personality. So anything positive that I have to say about this book happened at the end. And if this were a full book, if this weren't a short story, I probably would have DNF'd before I got to the actual heist. And finally is Tanya Tania by Antara Ganguly. This was her debut, and I feel bad because I do feel like I am being a bit harsh. This is the story of two girls named Tanya who were set up by their parents to write back and forth like pen pals. There was a kidnapping plot going on in Pakistan where Tanya Talati was located, as well as riots that were taking place in India where Tanya Ghosh was located. All of this action was taking place, but neither of the girls would really respond to what's going on in the other country. And this was happening in the 1990s. So there was a historical fiction element to this that wasn't really thrust into the forefront until a much later chapter that was huge. Like, the whole chapter was about these riots that were happening in Bombay, India, this religious tension. And that chapter was so interesting, except I wish that it was broken up a little bit more. But still, the build up to that, the way that these girls responded to each other's letters, it never really felt like they became friends. They never really felt friendly because they wouldn't feed off of each other that much. But there was one part at the end that made me so mad. But it happened at the ending, and it's a major spoiler, of course. So I can't talk about it here, but I was furious at a character in this book. I need to move on to my 1-star books, starting with The Puzzle Master by Danielle Trussoni. This used to be a 2-star book, but after further consideration, I dropped it down to 1. I could not latch on to any of the characters. They all sounded the same. They all sounded like the narration. There wasn't a lot of nuance. They were all smarty pants, and it just wasn't interesting to me. Second of all, the main character was the worst offender of this, because I went into this book thinking that he was just a nerd in general, that he would be someone that I could relate to in that sense, because I have always been a nerd. I've never been popular. I went into this like, okay, this is a character that I could probably latch onto because he's finally found his niche, his thing. But I didn't pay attention to the synopsis, and that's my bad because it did mention a football injury that caused his mind to shift to where he can see number sequences and solve puzzles with ease. I forgot about that in the synopsis. So when they started talking about how popular he was, how handsome he was, and now suddenly he's a genius, at least where puzzles are concerned, I'm like, well, dang it. I wanted somebody that I could relate to a little more than this, because I certainly was not the jock type. And I'm sure he has amazing abs, and he's like every other hot guy in every other book written ever. So yeah, I just could not get into the main character. And the fact that the author would constantly brag about how smart he was while he wasn't making the smartest decisions, just, I don't know, it turned me off to him pretty quickly. Another thing that turned me off on this book was the insta-love factor. I don't know what it was about a cold metal prison table that made Mike Brink, the main character, and Jess Price, the woman that he is trying to solve her case. I don't know how that prison table made them suddenly want to take each other's clothes off. There was this instant sexual attraction to each other that I just could not understand. And he would dream about her. It was like this was the thing that made Mike Brink want to take on this puzzle solving quest. This sudden attraction to this woman that he just met. And I also cannot forgive, still, I can't forgive Mike Brink for leaving his dog in the car in the beginning. I think Danielle Trussoni wanted to set him up as this really nice guy by giving his dog water. And of course, he's a dog guy, so everybody would fall in love with him because he had a pet. But he left the dog in the car. I don't care if he gave him water and food. It was in the middle of June. New York gets hot. You crack the window, but that only does so much. Like, I'm sure if the dog is well behaved, and it did turn out to be a service dog, I'm sure service dogs are allowed in some interior spaces in a prison. I don't understand why he had to leave the dog in the car. I can't get over that. The dog was my favorite character, so I am here advocating for the dog. And honestly, this video would be so long, but I could go on a complete tirade about the dog in this story and how the dog was treated. So, Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Penborough is the next 1-star book for me. I left a comment on Michaela Reed's video for this book where there's one good thing that came out of this, and it's that I was able to find her channel through this book because everybody was raving about this book, especially the ending, which I personally thought was a little offensive. But Behind Her Eyes is about this woman who met this dude at a bar. They shared a drink together and then a kiss, and suddenly she's obsessed with him. And he, David, the man, ends up being her new boss. I can't remember where she worked. I think it might be a law firm. But anyway, things immediately get tense. And despite finding out that he's a married man and not seeing the red flags because, you know, he kissed a woman while married to his wife, Adele, she obsesses over him anyway after that one kiss. And I'm like, don't do that. Don't. He's not worth your time. Part of this book was dedicated to making David seem like he's not this bad guy. But if I were in Louise's shoes, I don't know if I would be willing to get to that point. I don't know if I want to discover if he's not as bad as he initially seemed. I get that he's hot, but that's really all she mentioned. And finally, my least favorite book of this year was The Inmate by Frida McFadden. I should have DNF'd this book, but I didn't. This is the story of a woman named Brooke Sullivan who is moving back to her hometown after her son was bullied because he was the son of a single parent. That was an interesting choice. It was an interesting reason to get Brooke back into her hometown, which she was traumatized by. She hated her parents. They passed away. She moved into their house. All of this trauma came rushing back to her because she was almost killed in this town, and she ended up working as a doctor at the prison where her attempted murderer, who happened to be her ex-boyfriend and the father of her son, was being housed. Why would you do that? You could literally go anywhere else, but you chose to go back home to the house that belonged to your parents, who you did not get along with, in a town that knows a little bit too much about you, working at a prison where you put your ex away. All because your son was bullied because he's the child of a single mom. None of this made sense to me. But even more, there were so many points throughout this book where Brooke was triggered by her experience. These objects would set her into a panic, as they probably should. I could totally understand that. But the thing that I didn't understand was that the attempted murderer did not trigger anything. And in the process of determining whether or not he actually did it, she runs into the arms of the only possible other suspect that it could have been. None of this book made sense. It was all Frida McFadden trying to force pieces into a peg to make this story work, and absolutely nothing worked. The only reason why I even finished this book was because I wanted so badly to know how Brooke Sullivan came to the conclusions that she did. I have gone back and forth on whether or not I want to try another Frida McFadden book. Maybe this was just not her best work, but a lot of people have rated this book highly as well. With that being said, those are my lowest rated reads for this year. Obviously, 2 of them were probably fine. They could bump up to 3 stars. But if any of you are interested in any of these books mentioned today, the Goodreads links are in the description below. Give them a try. Seriously, my opinion is not the be-all, end-all. You may find that you love these books. So click on those links. Read more spoiler-free reviews if you want to. If you're feeling very brave after this video and want to purchase them from your retailer, you can do so. Or you can, of course, borrow them from your library or use your library app if they are available. Otherwise, I have been Jim. You've been great. Happy reading.